diagnostic emergencies in the module endocrinology. By the end of this topic, you should be able to define hypoglycemia, diabetic ketoacidosis, and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state or HHS. You should be able to explain the causes and pathophysiology of these conditions, explain the classification, describe the clinical manifestations of these conditions, outline the investigations and principles of management, and finally discuss the complications and prognoses of hypoglycemia, DKA, and HHS. Let's get started. Let's begin by understanding the definitions of these terms. Hypoglycemia can be explained by the Whipple's triad, which essentially is characterized by low plasma glucose level of less than 3.9 millimoles per liter, presence of autonomic or neuroglycopenic symptoms, and reversed by carbohydrate intake. Next, we will go through the definitions of DKA as well as HHS. DKA is an acute major life-threatening complication of diabetes, and it's characterized by hyperglycemia, ketoacidosis, and ketonuria. While hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state is a life-threatening emergency state characterized by hyperglycemia, hyperosmolality, and dehydration without significant ketoacidosis. Hypoglycemic symptoms essentially are caused by the stimulation of the sympathoadrenergic nervous system secondary to a decreased glucose level. This then leads to diaphoresis, palpitations, tremulousness, anxiety, and hunger. DKA primarily affects patients with type 1 diabetes mellitus, even though we also see them in type 2 diabetes mellitus. DKA is usually a consequence of either relative or absolute insulin deficiency accompanied by increase in counter-regulatory hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, glucagon, and growth hormones. As a result, there will be hepatic gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, lipolysis, and consequently ketogenesis. All of this will lead to severe hyperglycemia. There will be hyperglycemic-induced osmotic diuresis and loss of electrolytes leading to hypovolemia and dehydration. Lastly, let's go through the pathophysiology of hyperosmolar hyperglycemic states or HHS. Unlike DKA, HHS primarily affects patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. The pathophysiology is similar to DKA, but in HHS there will be a small amount of insulin that is being secreted by the pancreas. This small amount of insulin is sufficient to prevent ketoacidosis by suppressing lipolysis and thus ketogenesis. There will be gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis leading to hyperglycemia. As a result, there will be hyperglycemic-induced osmotic diuresis and loss of electrolytes leading to marked dehydration. Moving on to the causes of this condition, in the case of hypoglycemia, it may be caused by insulin or oral hypoglycemic medication changes or overdose. Hypoglycemia may also be caused by infections, insulinoma, and uncontrolled type 2 diabetes mellitus with glucose variability. DKA, on the other hand, may be caused by infections, missed or disrupted insulin, previously unknown diabetes, and even thrombosis. And lastly, hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state may be caused by infections, stroke, intracranial hemorrhage, pulmonary embolism, and acute pancreatitis. It can also be caused by silent MI. It is crucial to consider MI in all patients with HHS until it has been excluded. Do bear in mind that these are not exhaustive list of causes and just some common ones. Here, let's take a look at how we can classify hypoglycemia and DKA. Both hypoglycemia and DKA can be classified into mild, moderate, and severe forms. In mild hypoglycemia, you will see adrenergic and mild neurological symptoms that can be prevented by oral glucose intake. In moderate hypoglycemia, you will also see the presence of neurological symptoms that may prevent the patient from taking oral glucose, requiring help from an observer instead. In severe hypoglycemia, as the name suggests, there will be presence of severe neurological symptoms, and most of the patients will need glucagon and intravenous dextrose. In the case of mild diabetes ketoacidosis, there will be no alteration in sensorium. The arterial pH will be between 7.25 and 7.3, while the serum bicarbonate will be about 15 to 18 milliequivalents per liter, with an anion gap of more than 10 milliequivalent per liter. Moving on to moderate diabetic ketoacidosis, there may or may not be alteration in sensorium or drowsiness. The arterial pH will be between 7 to 7.24 with a serum bicarbonate level of 10 to 15 milliequivalents per liter and an anion gap of more than 12. And lastly, in severe DKA, the patients will be stuporous or in coma with an arterial pH of less than 7, and the serum bicarbonate level will be less than 10 with an anion gap of more than 12. Do take note that in all three mild, moderate, and severe DKA, there is presence of both serum and urine ketones. Next, we'll discuss the typical clinical manifestations that you will see in all three conditions, beginning with hypoglycemia. You'd expect to see autonomic symptoms. Due to the increased sympathetic activity, the patient may complain of tremors, palpitations, sweating, and anxiety. And due to the increased parasympathetic activity, the patient could also complain of hunger, paresthesia or tingling sensation, nausea, and vomiting. There may be neuroglycopenic symptoms such as fatigue, agitation, and behavioral changes, to name a few. In both diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state or HHS, the patients usually complain of polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, recent weight loss, nausea, vomiting, lethargy, weakness, and blurred vision. Specifically in DKA, the patients may also complain of abdominal pain. Now, let's take a look at the signs. In hypoglycemia, certainly the patients would have a low GCS level. While assessing the vital signs, the patient may be hypothermic, tachypneic, tachycardic, hypertensive, and in a case of neonates, bradycardic. Patients may also have decreased skin turgor due to dehydration. As for DKA, the patients are generally unwell, tachycardic, and presents with labored breathing, which we call Kussmaul's respiration. There will also be fruity odor smell from the patient's breath due to exhaled acetone. And lastly, you may also notice depressed reflexes. In hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state, the patient may have tachycardia, tachypnea, hypotension, altered mental status, confusion, signs of profound dehydration such as dry skin and mucous membrane, sunken eyes, and neurological symptoms like headache and dizziness. The patient may also be in coma. Now, a diagnosis of hypoglycemia, DKA, and HHS state can be made when a few parameters have been reached. For hypoglycemia, this would be plasma glucose concentration of less than 3 millimoles per liter. In the case of diabetic ketoacidosis, there needs to be ketonemia of 3 millimoles per liter and over or significant ketonuria of more than 2 plus on standard urine sticks. Additionally, there needs to be a blood glucose level of more than 11 millimoles per liter or a known history of diabetes mellitus. And lastly, the venous bicarbonate levels should be less than 15 millimoles per liter and or a venous pH of less than 7.3. For HHS, on the other hand, there needs to be presence of hyperglycemia of more than 30 millimoles per liter, mild or absent ketonemia with a blood ketone level of less than 3 millimoles per liter, and high osmolality of more than 320 milliosmoles per kilogram. Let's take a look at the investigations that can be done. It's important that there are some bedside tests that can be carried out to help determine the underlying cause. Firstly, you want to do a urine analysis to look for the presence of any urine ketones, glucose and leukocytes and nitrites. Next, you can also do an electrocardiogram or ECG to look at any evidence of cardiac ischemia and arrhythmia due to electrolyte imbalances. And a blood gas analysis may also be useful to measure the patient's blood pH. Next, how about lab tests? Firstly, start by ordering a full blood count to look for evidence of infection, which will indicate raised leukocytes if there's an infection. You can also consider a HbA1c test to assess the patient's average glycemic control over the past 3 to 4 months. Next, a renal profile would be beneficial to assess the state of dehydration as well as serum sodium and potassium levels. A serum electrolyte level could be done to look for abnormalities related to polyuria and dehydration. And you may also consider doing blood cultures if you're suspecting sepsis. Next, let's look at the necessary imaging studies to order. A chest X-ray can be done to ascertain the likely underlying cause, for example, if you're suspecting a lower respiratory tract infection. An abdominal X-ray can be ordered in circumstances where the patient presents with acute abdomen to rule out any other causes or to identify the underlying cause. If appropriate and necessary, you can get a CT scan done to look for occult infection, deep-seated infection, or masses in the case of complicated urinary tract infections. Next, let's take a look at the medical management of these conditions. The general principles for hyperglycemic emergencies would be fluid resuscitation and fluid maintenance therapy with potassium correction in order to improve the intravascular component and maintain normal serum potassium levels. Then an intravenous infusion or insulin should also be administered. Generally, you need to treat any underlying cause and take appropriate measures to prevent any complications. For hypoglycemia, you will need to detect and treat the low plasma glucose level promptly. You also need to eliminate the risk of injury to oneself and to relieve symptoms quickly. Please remember to try and avoid overcorrection of hypoglycemia, especially in repeated cases, as this will lead to poor glycemic control and weight gain. For DKA, you will need to aim for a certain rate of fall of decrease of ketones, which would be at least 0.5 millimoles per liter per hour, increase of bicarbonate by 3 millimoles per liter per hour, and a decrease in plasma glucose of at least 3 millimoles per liter per hour. While doing this, it is important to maintain serum potassium within normal range. And next, for HHS, you will need to gradually and safely correct the dehydration. The serum osmolality needs to also be reduced, and any electrolyte imbalance should be corrected. You will also need to control the hyperglycemia, aiming for a reduction of blood glucose by 4 to 6 millimoles per liter per hour. In the case of surgical therapy, this only would be necessary if there is deep-seated infection with collection amenable to drainage. Now, let's take a look at the potential complications of these diabetic emergencies. In hypoglycemia, there is a possibility of neuroglycopenic coma, while in hyperglycemic emergencies, the possible complications are cerebral edema, deep vein thrombosis, myocardial infarction, respiratory distress, hypophosphatemia, hypokalemia, cerebrovascular accidents, and cerebral venous thrombosis. Generally, prognosis-wise, there is high mortality rate, especially in these conditions if they are not recognized early and treated appropriately. Now, let's summarize what we have covered so far. Both diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic states are life-threatening complications characterized by a state of hyperglycemia. In diabetic ketoacidosis, there would be ketoacidosis and ketonuria, while in hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state, there is hyperosmolality and profound dehydration without any significant ketoacidosis. Hypoglycemia, on the other hand, is a condition in which there is low plasma glucose of less than 3.9 millimoles per liter with autonomic or neuroglycopenic symptoms, which are reversed by carbohydrate intake. The diagnosis of these conditions are based on bedside and lab investigations. Generally, hyperglycemic emergencies would be treated with treating the precipitating factors or underlying cause, rehydration, correction of plasma glucose levels, and serum electrolytes, and also to prevent any complications. In the case of hypoglycemia, it is managed based on the presence of the symptoms. We have come to the end of this topic. Thank you.